Hi, everyone. This is me, Dominic, from Grad Occupational Therapy. We're coming live to you today with Meredyth Given from MedBridge Education. She was nice enough to meet up and talk and give us kind of the inside scoop of everything you need to do or know about continuing education units as a new grad occupational therapist. Coming live to you today. So Meredyth, why don't you kind of take the ball and kind of give us your spiel about how you got into this. Did it fall into your lap? Have you always wanted to do this for MedBridge? What's your title? That kind of sort of thing.
Yeah, sure. So I'm the accreditation manager for MedBridge, and so I basically handle the accreditation for all of our courses. So for our occupational therapists, our physical therapists, speech and language pathologists, nursing, I make sure that we have the right messaging. I work with the boards. I work with the national organizations to make sure that we have the highest level approval for our courses. And I've been in healthcare education for 16 years now, and I used to work for accredited schools, so I was really familiar with that process and the licensing process for healthcare workers. And so I did kind of fall into MedBridge. I found the organization. It's an amazing organization to work with. We're super passionate about what we do, and it's really high quality education. So that's kind of why I ended up landing here.
That's awesome. So I know I sort of touched on this before we started, but so I'm a new grad OT, and I went to our national AOTA convention and met the MedBridge crew. But afterwards, I went to all these sessions and I had all these CEUs. And so I have to go online. I have to go through the whole list and kind of punch in where I went and what times I was there. And then you get this form at the end that says like you have so many PDUs, so many CEUs. And then from there, I didn't really know what to do. So like, what is the difference between a PDU or a CEU? Is there one? And then do I submit the form? Do I just hold on to it and hope I don't get audited? Kind of what's the next step?
So one thing you're going to hear me say a lot today is it's very state specific. So first and foremost, everyone needs to be licensed, right, in every 50 states. And unfortunately, all those states are a little bit different. And so my main theme today is like get to know your state board website, because there's a ton of information on there. But I'm going to talk to a lot of the little things you want to look for on your state board, because there are all these little things you need to know before your first renewal. But to answer your first question, like what's the difference between a contact hour, a CEU, professional development unit? And it really depends on your organization. So CEU is sort of like the standard that 10 contact hours equals 1 CEU. So ASHA uses this, and usually organizations that have this additional accreditation from ISAT, which is like the international holder of the CEU, that's what they use. And so that's where you for each contact hour, you're only actually accumulating like 0.1. So for your AOTA renewal, you might have to do 3 CEUs, which would be 30 contact hours.
Gotcha.
Professional development units, it's sort of a broader term and it captures a lot of different things. And that's usually where they're allowing you to do things like reading a professional journal, like things that aren't really quantified in a contact hour.
Gotcha. Awesome.
Yeah.
Super good. So why don't you, if you've got anything like you want to kind of let kind of the listeners know or the new grad OTs know kind of about MedBridge and what you guys offer. And then after that, I have a list of questions for you that we curated from social media that I think might kind of resonate with everyone across the board.
Yeah, so just a little bit about MedBridge, and most specifically to occupational therapists, is we have a ton of content. And so that's the great thing, is like it's all one shop stop for your online education needs. Really high quality, that we are very stringent about who we have instruct for us. So these are the experts. So they're the people who've done the research themselves, are highly acclaimed in their field. We really only work with referrals. So usually if somebody comes to us and say, hey, I want to teach for you, a lot of times, most of the time, probably 98% of the time, we don't just have somebody come to us and say they want to teach, is we're seeking them out based on our expert referrals. Everything we do is evidence-based. And then most importantly, we're an AOTA approved provider. And that's what, when you're looking for CEUs or professional development, you want to look for the AOTA approved providers because all 50 states accept those courses. So you don't have to worry about, hey, is this going to be accepted or not accepted? Is it approved by the right entity? Because if it's an AOTA approved provider who's offering it, it's most likely going to be accepted by your board.
Gotcha. That's awesome. So is everything like do I read them? Do I listen? Are they videos? Are they hands-on? How does, like, what's the format kind of look like?
So they're video presentations or high quality video presentations with an accompanying like PowerPoint deck that we have state-of-the-art animators and graphic designers that help enhance our courses. So it's constantly engaging because it's really important for us. Online education, if you just sat there and somebody lectured you for an hour, you'd probably fall asleep. So we really look to make sure that the content is applicable, so immediately applicable. So if we're talking about a subject, a lot of times the teachers are going to be doing demos. They might have a panel discussion. They might have an actual patient to work through things in. So we really want to make sure that we're taking that evidence-based information and making it immediately applicable for you to take back to your clinic with you.
That's cool. And I know you touched on this with me earlier, but it sounds like since you guys do a lot of different like healthcare professions, there's like, if I have a question about something, I can actually look in like the PT section, or if I'm doing pediatrics and I have a question about swallowing.
Right.
You were saying like I could check out the speech language pathology kind of section and see if those transfer as well for my state, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. Like our catalog, you can sort it by occupational therapy and then the different specific specialties in occupational therapy. But then you can also say, and like if a course is cross applicable, so say it's also applicable for speech and language pathology, but it's approved for OTs, it'll fall in that catalog under occupational therapy. So you shouldn't have to dig too far. Is as soon as you go to the website and you say, I'm an occupational therapist, all the approved courses show up there. And so you kind of can go from there, which is hundreds of courses. I think we have probably about 600 occupational therapy courses. And we have tons of pediatrics, geriatrics. We've got stuff for certified hand therapists. I think we really have it all covered.
That's awesome. Well, yeah. I'm sure there's always like room to grow, right?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. And we're always looking to add to our catalog. We launch about 60 courses a month.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Awesome. In all disciplines.
Are those like pay-per-view? Is it pay-per-credit?
Yeah, so it's subscription based. You can pay per course, but the most like bang for your buck is really to get that subscription, and then you have full access for an entire year, and you can take as many courses as you want. And I think too, like as I once was a new grad, it's like you're so hungry for more information and you're getting out there, and so I think it's great for new grads because you can do as much as you want that first with your subscription.
That's cool. So it's kind of like Netflix or something
like
that.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay.
It's
cool.
Yeah.
And you can take as many as you want, I assume. So say I really was interested, and I don't know if you know like much on like the content, but we actually had a writer, she wrote an article about like the certificate program. I don't know if you can touch on that a bit, but she reached out to me and said, hey, can I write this about MedBridge because I'm using it? I was like, sure, why not? Yeah. But I think I reached out to you guys to get like a little more info, but I think are there 7 categories that you can kind of get like a certificate in, and like, so I don't know, you can probably touch on it more.
Yeah, so the certificate programs really got centered around like the physical therapy specialties. But what I find is a lot of OTs are taking the upper extremity certificate because they're looking for those hand and upper extremity courses. There's a differential diagnosis. Sometimes that's interesting to folks. We're just launching a pediatric certificate course. And so there's lots of cool pediatric courses coming out. And so basically we have the certificate programs are just a series of courses to sort of get you up to speed in a certain area of content. Some of them have, like, for example, the differential diagnosis. Some PTs have a requirement in their states to be able to do the direct care, the direct access. And so they have to take that for that reason. But a lot of them are credited for both PTs and OTs. And the upper extremity one specifically is fully approved by the AOTA.
I bet that's really popular, actually.
Yeah, it's interesting because we really introduced it first for PTs, and a lot of OTs have inquired about it. So, and as we've added a lot of upper extremity courses with our that were developed by OTs. We're just getting more people using our platform for that certification.
Well, why don't I, let me pull up my list of questions I have from, I think it was Instagram that we pulled them from. But
okay.
I want to, before we get going, I want to address the viewers for the live. If you guys have questions, comments, concerns, or something you want to hear about, let us know. I've got the chat pulled up in a different window. So if you guys leave a question for either me or Meredyth, we're happy to answer it for you. I got them right here on my phone. 1 second. Let me see. So our social media director, Devin, is an Instagram guru. So she reached out to our followers. So
nice.
How do we document them? That's something I asked about. So after, say, I watch say my work gives me money to get a MedBridge subscription, and I have 2 days to get my CEUs. What do I do after that? Like, what's the process?
Right. So what I would suggest, so every state's a little different in how you report. So some states, and most often most states, will have you attest that you've completed all your hours. So you go to renew your license and say your requirement is 30 hours. You're going to check a box that says you solemnly swear that you have completed those continuing education requirements in accordance to what those regulations say. And that's why I always say get into those websites so you know your requirements. And so basically, most states audit about 10% of their clinicians each year. Some states might be less, some states might more, about 10%. So you may get audited once in your lifetime as a clinician. You may never get audited, but you want to have that paperwork when it happens. So whether it's electronically or paper, as soon as you get done a course, save that certificate for somewhere, because if by chance you do get audited, you want to, I think what happens to most people is they panic, like, oh my God, right? Because they might not have had everything in one place, but the best practice is put that certificate somewhere. If you have a folder on your computer, like if it's for us, download the certificate so you know that you have it. And when you get audited, it's easy peasy. You can just send them all your certificates.
Gotcha.
So you're not at a loss or have to explain, like, I know I did this, but I don't have, or come to us. Sometimes people lose stuff. But with like most online platforms, they're going to keep your certificates there for you if you want to download them. I would be extra safe and just, have them in a file too.
Okay. Good to know. I have, just one from AOTA, and I think I saved it somewhere, but I'm assuming I can go back somewhere online and find it if I need to.
Right. And I'll just add to that too, because like you're saying, you might do something at work. So say you have some courses from an online platform, plus you do some live stuff. It's great to have everything in one place. That's all your, like, hey, if you have a 30 hours requirement, I know I've got my 30 hours all documented here, right?
Mm-hmm. So I don't know if you have the chat open, but I can just certainly read it to you. We have our first question. Hello from Pennsylvania.
Pennsylvania.
My question is, can you get all of your CEUs without actually working? I'm currently staying at home with my daughter now. I passed the MBCOT in May of 2017, so I renew in 2020. So I think she's asking about her national licensure versus her state registration. So
yeah, so it depends on, and honestly, I don't know the top of my head. If your professional body requires a certain amount of clinical work. Some do, some don't, because I have all the disciplines in my head running around right now. So some do require an annual, like you have to have worked 200 hours or you've had to have worked 100 hours, because that's part of keeping up your skills and that's what their intent. Not every state has that. Actually, very little states do. And I know you're asking about MBCOT, so I'm not sure what their requirements are at the top of my head. They have a great website that has a ton of information. And so really helpful. They have a great professional development grid that'll tell you all the applicable activities for them. So
awesome.
Yeah.
Maybe I can find that. And I'll put the link in the description below the video when this is all.
Yeah.
But to Sonic Nova 82, I'm not sure if I've actually heard of people having to work after they pass. I think as long as you get your CEUs and you don't let it lapse, you don't have to retake the test. The only reason I say that is because I think of therapists that might be in a non-clinical role, like maybe working at MedBridge or teaching or working as a medical review audit, like people that review all the healthcare notes and stuff like that.
Right.
So I mean, there's plenty of roles OT work in that are like non-clinical. So
yeah,
like
and yeah, that's a great point. There are other, like nursing, like their state regulations a lot of times do require a certain amount of like feel like they have to have clinical hours. So maybe that's what she's hearing, like that some healthcare providers are having to do that. But I don't feel like I've come across that a lot with occupational therapist.
Yeah, that doesn't sound familiar. So I'm going through my list here. Some of the stuff we've already touched about. So a lot of these questions we got are people are saying like, I work in acute care, like where do I go? I work in pediatrics, where do I go? Do you guys kind of separate by practice areas of healthcare professionals, or is it kind of like upper extreme, say like I work in acute care and I want to learn more about strokes? Is it kind of like a stroke section? And like if someone works in pediatrics, is it like a swallow or sensory stuff? Kind of go ahead and
yeah, no, great questions. So each of our catalogs, like whether you're an OT or PT or SLP, is very specific to the profession and how the profession looks at things. So for OTs, like we do separate it into geriatrics and pediatrics because people are looking for those type of specific courses. I believe under that catalog too, like we have a section for like under pediatrics, there might be autism because people are interested in working with kids with sensory issues. There might be with stroke, it might specifically be more diagnosis focused because you're usually getting referred to, people are getting referred to you out of the diagnosis where I'll say like for SLPs, it might be more condition focused, right? So that like you go to the SLP catalog and it'll actually say dysphagia, right? Whereas for an OT, it might be stroke.
Awesome.
So you can, you can search all those things based on what you're more specific to your field.
That makes sense too, because a lot of those diagnosis or conditions are kind of, you see kind of across the continuum of care. So it wouldn't quite make sense to kind of separate it for acute care or pediatrics or or rehab when like you might see a stroke at hospital and rehab at home, kind of a community-based stuff like that. So we have another comment. It's not a question, but Mary Lee is she's a YouTuber and occupational therapist. She was just saying hi and showing her love for NGOT and MedBridge.
Hello
Mary,
there.
you're awesome. Thanks. And another one from Ray. He likes my shirt and he is from Seattle. So
cool. All right, we're right in your town, MedBridge is.
Yeah, so if anyone didn't know, MedBridge is based in Seattle. Kind of Amazon, Nintendo, Microsoft tech bubble.
All the techs, all the techs. So I could also give, I had a couple of things like that I wanted to go over that are important, like as a new grad, right, where you're getting new, going for your first renewal, some things to think about is, I mean, first and foremost, I think everybody knows to look up their general requirements of like, how many continuing education hours do you need to do, right? So that's the first thing you want to find on your site. And like I said, the board sites are really helpful. A lot of times they have frequently asked questions. Your regulations are actually there. So it's really good to sort of, as boring and cumbersome as they may seem, it's really good to read the nitty gritty of the regulations so you know exactly what the requirements are. And then really important thing is, does your state have special content requirements? So some states, besides your base CEs, they might want you to do ethics to renew. They might want you to do CPR. Here in Washington, you have to take a one-time suicide prevention course that's 3 hours to renew. If you're in Florida, you have medical errors requirements and HIV/AIDS. So it's really important to know like these specific, is there an extra requirement that I need to do? Then types of content. Different states allow you to do different things. So some states just want courses. Other states will allow you to do read a peer-reviewed journal, right? And they only usually allow you to do like a couple hours of that, but it's another option out there. And then a really important thing is, are there any restrictions? So some states do restrict the number of online hours that you can do. You might have a live requirement. So one example would be like, for instance, Florida. They have a restriction on the number of online self-study courses you can do. But if you do a live interactive webinar, which of course we have, that can count towards your live requirement. So it's all these like little nuancy things that are really important to sort of why you want to go to your board and not just like trust, like your friend says, hey, you just have to do 24 hours, right? It's all good. Just do those 24 hours. So make sure you know those little so you're not panicked, right? We have a state that's like going through a renewal right now. Pennsylvania, for example, has a child abuse course that you have to do every year or every 2 years with a renewal. And so we always get those last minute course completions of like, please send this to my state, and, so I can get, because they actually hold up people's licenses. So, so if you're in Pennsylvania, for Ray out there, or not Ray, it was someone else who was from Pennsylvania, make sure you get your child abuse detection course in.
Good to know.
Yeah.
It's really interesting to learn about all of like the different states and stuff and the weird nuances because I went to school in Massachusetts, so I kind of learned what was needed in Massachusetts, and I don't think they have actually any for the state. And then like I came to Montana, so I had to like relearn like what I needed to do and had to Google and look it up.
Yeah.
But it's interesting you mentioned that, and this is like, I think it's ended up being purely coincidental, but we had a gal, one of our writers, and it just came out today, she released an ebook of like how to get your licensure in all 50 states.
Oh,
and so, yeah. And so like, that's super tedious, right? But she was really, really smart. And what she did is she made a Google survey and a form, and it populated into an Excel spreadsheet, and she sent it around social media and crowdsourced it, everything. So,
wow.
I should probably send it out to like the 50 states to make sure everything's correct. But she had everyone, or maybe I'll send it to you. Yeah. She got 50 answers for Pennsylvania that said like 24 hours or something like that.
Right.
I was able to kind of make the ebook that way. So I'll leave the link down below that, and maybe I'll send it to you so you can just, if you don't, I was kidding, don't audit it or anything, but just take a quick peek and see if you notice anything.
Yeah. And it's interesting because a lot of it's interpretation. Sometimes it's not super clear. We were working with an organization in New York, and they have 3 sections of their regulations, and they missed the fact that they have an online restriction. And they were like, I've been practicing here for 10 years. I didn't know about this. I was like, surprise. So yeah, it's like interpretation. And sometimes there's other little chapters in there that if you don't check this, because it's, one of the things that I've learned doing accreditation is you'd think all states, all laws and administrative codes are written very similarly. They're not. And so each state is a little different, like you were saying. It's just, and that's interesting too. There's a lot of OT states that don't have CE requirements right now. So that you might be in a state that doesn't require it.
Which is mind blowing, by the way. Like Massachusetts has laws for everything.
Yeah.
So it just blows my mind.
Yeah, it is interesting. And it's a cost thing for some states. Like, do they have the money in the budget to administer it? Is there risk, right, to it? So that's really, it's interesting how they make their decisions. It's like purely like, are we at risk by not requiring this right now? So that's one thing. Let's see, what other things I was going to tell you guys? We talked about audits. I think that's super important to keep your documentation.
So if I take everything on MedBridge, is there a place like, say, if I forget to download my receipt or what have you and save it to my desktop, is there a way for, like, does everything save on MedBridge? Can I ever go back there like 2 years later and just like pull everything? Yep,
it's there for you to download as many times as you want. And cool. So once you take a course and you complete it, it saves the approval information from that period of time. Basically, so when you finished your courses and it was approved, that certificate will forever show that you took this course. Because sometimes courses, usually with AOTA, they don't expire. When we get into PT states, we have sort of expiration dates. So that's a nice thing about the AOTA too, is that things don't necessarily expire. And yeah, we keep it to you, keep it for you. And it also keeps track of your hours. So, you add your license in. And so if you're, our system knows what your license requirements are. So if you're in a state such as New York and you have 30 hours, it would keep a record of like, hey, your license is you're in danger. You've not done enough credits yet. So
that's sweet.
Yeah.
That's
it's a nice little extra.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're like, because I've never used it before. And since I've never taken the only CEUs I've done or like at the conference just listening to lectures.
Yeah.
Like after, say I watch a video on the upper extremity, is there a quiz afterwards or anything like that kind of like, I don't know, how does it?
Yeah, so for AOTA approved providers, we have to have a testing mechanism, and there's a 70% pass rate requirement for AOTA approved providers. And so we put quizzes after each chapter. So there's not a final assessment. So after each chunk of learning, so you learn sort of some discrete information, and then we test you afterwards. So if it's like a 5-chapter course, you'd have 5 short quizzes, and those range from 1 to 3 questions. So they're usually not like 10-question quizzes. They're just quick. And then we also provide the rationale. So if by chance you choose a wrong answer, you'll get the feedback of like why that answer is incorrect and what the better answer was.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Awesome. That's good to know.
Yeah.
I like that idea a lot better, by the way, just doing a couple questions. Easier to remember.
Yeah, easy to remember. And it's like reinforcing what you just learned is really the goal. Is like, this is professional development. It's not meant to test you in terms of, you've passed your licensure, you've passed all that. So it's really just to make sure that we're implanting the knowledge further.
Gotcha. Cool.
Yeah.
I'll keep going through my list to make sure we don't like double up on anything. You guys have so one of the questions is like, what's the best source for like pediatric continuing ed courses? And I know we already talked about how we don't really separate it by practice area, but do you guys have like a most popular list or top 10 or most common or anything like that?
Yeah, I'm trying to think. So we just launched the S-Certs series, which is a group of 7 courses that's a really specific framework for working with kids with autism. And that's super popular right now. It's really, the 3 professors that did it, it's very well structured. It has like really great reinforcement of the learning throughout. So I think that's a great course, especially if you're as a school-based therapist going into working with kids with sensory disorders. It's a great foundational series. We have a lot of great pediatric courses. So we have a lot of early intervention courses that are walking people around the regulations around early intervention. I think that's important, like how to document IEP planning. So those type of things I think are really nice foundational things as you start to work in schools to sort of understand your guardrails that you're working with kids and providing services. So I would look for those type of things.
I'm not a pediatrics guy, but I know from people I talk to, those seem like big barriers. And a lot of times it's kind of just like, because at school they cram so much at us that, and I feel like IEPs and stuff like that are just maybe some of the things that are kind of skipped or you might touch on in your clinical experiences, but the OT overseeing things probably does it all because it is kind of like a official document of sorts.
Right.
Someone who does pediatrics can correct me, but it sounds like MedBridge does a really nice job of like filling in the blanks of like what you learned in school and then practice, and then new grads are kind of stuck in the middle and they're not really sure what the heck they're supposed to do because they didn't learn it, or they learned it once for like a 30-minute lecture and were expected to memorize it, or memorized it and then forgot it. So it sounds like you guys are like a really good a bridge of sorts.
Yeah, and that's definitely our goal is really exploring like when you're designing education for professional development, you really have to establish what's called a gap, a practice gap. So you don't want to just create a course for the sake of creating a course. You want to sort of like, what are the field needs? What are the learning needs? And so we work really close with our occupational therapy consultants to sort of figure out what are those gaps and what are the knowledge, skills, and practices that people need to learn. And so to your point, like the IEP, you're not going to learn that in school most likely. Or maybe if you did a clinical internship at a school, you might get some familiarity with that, but your school's there to teach you the clinical skills, not the regulatory skills, right? So documentation is huge though, right? For any type of therapist, learning how to document so you're, showing that you're making progress and all those things and have your goals for your client. Huge stuff.
Yeah, of course. That's kind of the most important.
Right.
So it sounds like you have like a group of like rehab or just healthcare professionals that consult. Are you guys kind of on the trend of like the new stuff coming out? Like I'm just thinking like the PT world, it's the big buzz right now is dry needling. Like some people some people are all for it. Some people are like, no way, no, not enough evidence. We don't need that.
Right.
You guys kind of follow those trends and like make the content? You guys kind of wait and do the research? How do you guys decide what goes up and what doesn't?
I mean, we really rely on our expert consultants. I mean, that's really the heart of what we do. And what I love about what we do is that we're working with people who are in the field and specifically their field. So if it's not just an OT, it's an OT who's working in pediatrics, who's the leader in their field, like the folks that created the SERTs class, that they're the leaders in their field of that. They've created that whole system and only we have it. And so it's partnering with them because they're going to know they're out there working with folks every day. They know what the needs of the field are. Again, like we do have dry needling courses for our PTs. So we followed that trend too. And it's been a little bit of a controversial trend. Like some states, it's not within the scope of practice. Some states it is. I think we try to stay as ahead. All of our courses have to be supported by 5 recent peer-reviewed journals when they launch. So of course it's enduring content, so it might be out there for 2 years, but when it launched, it had as recent as 5 years of recent supported evidence. So that's really huge too.
That's really cool. That's awesome. Yeah. That's really cool to hear. It just helps knowing that there aren't people like learning just like some crazy technique or something and doing it on other people.
Right. Yeah. It has to be.
I'm not saying that dry needling is that, but yeah, I get continuing education course stuff in the mail, and I can never tell like if it's legit or not.
Right.
Sometimes because it's probably mass produced, it's like on this cheap paper, which is probably a cost saver, but to me it looks like, oh, like this looks fake, and they just like want my $50 check. So it's really good to know you guys' stuff kind of goes through like a check and balances type situation.
Yeah, and even so much as if we have courses, so say it's a physical therapist created course, we have our occupational therapy consultant review the course to make sure it's actually appropriate. So it's the PT might say, hey, I think this is applicable to OTs, but our consultant also has to also review that and make sure it like absolutely is relevant for your field too. So you're not taking a course that you're like, wow, this has nothing to do with me, right? Gotcha. And of course, some of those courses that are PT developed might be feel like a little PT centric, but it should be applicable and to your field also,
or vice versa, or whatever.
Right, exactly.
That sounds like a really cool job, by the way. Whoever gets to like be the OT consultant on research and content sounds like a really fun job.
Yeah, I think they really enjoy it. We have great relationships with our consultant teams, and I give courses for them to review every month. I just gave her 30 courses to review this month.
Wow.
So it's a lot of stuff to get through for them. But I'm sure it's super fun.
Do you have any other tips about like the stuff I get in the mail? Not that you need to like talk down, but how can like a new grad tell just in general about like how do we weed out like what's legit and what's like a money scam? I know part of it's on us to like look up the peer-reviewed research of stuff before you pay for it.
Right.
But do you have any other tips or tricks or?
I mean, I think first and foremost, you have you have the AOTA. Like safeguarding your field, really. I mean, because as an approved provider, you have to have met certain standards, and you have to have a very standardized approach to how you develop and create your courses. So first and foremost, I would just look for that, because that's it's a professional organization that you're dealing with. If they had to pass those standards, you know that the AOTA is monitoring them to some degree. And so that's one thing that's like, okay, I got that stamp of approval. I think the next thing is just to, every course should have a bio of the teacher, right? So what is their background and what they're teaching? And I think the more experience they have, obviously, the better. And is it recent and relevant experience? I mean, that's a thing too that we look for within our teachers. It's like, are they doing stuff right now, right? Are they current in the field? Not just, hey, I went to school for 20 years ago and I've been practicing and I think I'm good at this, right? So it's like, are they established in the field? And sometimes it's good just even to like take that teacher and sort of do a search on them, right? Look up them on LinkedIn, right? What is their presence in the field? So I think, because the teachers really a lot of times can make the course because they're bringing their experience. They're taking, like, I always think of it as like they're doing the research, the evidence-based practice, right? It's like you're supposed to go out and do these extensive research on something that you want to try. They're really cultivating and curating that evidence for you to bring the best available evidence. So that's why the expert teachers are huge.
That's cool. That's a really good tip. I mean, I think we've covered almost everything. Oh, let's touch on this. Is again something we touched on before we start talking. What are your thoughts on like taking continuing education credits as a student? I know MedBridge has like a student sort of program, but I'd love to hear like pros, cons. Can you even? Why would someone? Stuff like that.
Yeah. So the reason you would take continuing ed as a student is to purely to develop yourself further, right? So say it's something you didn't get in school, in graduate school, and you want to learn more about it. Unfortunately, most states, if you're looking for it to count to your licensure, most states don't. Once you're licensed, that's the continuing education that actually counts. So say I just graduated, I didn't get licensed, I took 20 hours. Most likely, I'm not going to be able to apply that for my first renewal. So it's really, it's great because you're increasing your skills, you're developing yourself. It probably look good on your resume as you start to apply, right? So and that's really what professional development and continuing ed is about, right? It's just continuing to keep yourself current and expand your skill set. But in terms of actually applying to that first renewal, it might not apply for you.
Gotcha.
Sorry to say.
No, I'd never really thought of it, and I was never the student to do a whole bunch of extra work, but it's really cool to know like that exists. Since you don't get credit, is it cheaper for students, or like do they get a discount if they use like a student email address or something like that?
Yeah, so we do have student memberships, and I think they're $99 off the. I don't do the money part of things with the subscriptions, but I think they're definitely a reduced rate. And yeah, it's a great thing. Is like if you're going out and you're like you're talking about the school-based therapist, right? Like, and it's a great way to get yourself up to speed, right? And what's going on in the field. So I think I was one of those students. I was a massage therapist in my former life, so
that's cool.
A little bit of therapy background, right?
Yeah.
And I always did tons of continuing education because I just wanted to keep learning more. And so I think that's the other thing too. Sometimes another good point is like, say your hours are 30 hours to renew, but you did 50 hours. Every state's a little different and whether you can like apply that extra hours in your next renewal. More often they don't allow you. They want it just to keep like, hey, you did 30 hours in this period and that's it. Yeah. That's all we'll take. Occasionally they allow you to spill over into the next renewal.
Oh, good to know.
Yeah.
It sounds like a really cool. Is anything limited to the students, or is it all like 99 for the same that everyone else pays for?
Yeah,
or
it's just
like a.
It gives them access to the continuing education. It doesn't give them access to the patient education and the home exercise program libraries. But I highly recommend you guys check those out because they're amazing. And so we've got a whole bunch of new, again, going back to pediatrics, we've got a whole bunch of new cool pediatric stuff. I was just watching some video today. We were doing some motor learning stuff with some kids with cerebral palsy recently in our studio, and it was just neat to see them learning these new skills. And there'll be there'll be home exercise videos for parents, basically. So that's another cool aspect about MedBridge is that we have that library. So once you get out there practicing, and one thing it's good to check, like like you had said earlier, what is your employer, once you get employed, what does your employer offer? Because a lot of employers do want to offer their clinicians continuing ed, and many people have MedBridge already. So you might already have access at your first job.
So I think at my work, like I get $1,000 a year, and I blew it all in the conference. Didn't blow it, and I wanted to go, and it was awesome and loved it. And I still had money left over. But I know like for employers, like bigger employers too, like they get a discount for their, and I know again you said the money thing, but I don't think like if I tell my boss like, hey, I want a MedBridge subscription, comes on my pot, but it's not the full price. They generally have like a negotiation or pull. So I haven't actually signed up for it, but you were talking about the home exercise program thing, which looks really cool, and I kind of know about it, and I don't want to speak to it because I don't want to like butcher your product, but I know I was sitting down with like just next to like a PT who was like printing off a bunch of back exercises for them. But there's a way, isn't there an app as well? So if I had a patient, I could just like put my exercises on his phone essentially?
Yeah, absolutely. You give them an access code, they download the app, and then you can assign them an exercise program. And what I love about our program is like, it also tells you timing. So as you're getting all excited and loading them up on the exercise, it kind of says like, hey, you're at 90 minutes. Like maybe this is too much for this one, right? And so it lets you like change the frequency.
Does it tell me if they actually do it?
Yes. So for
really? I was just kidding.
Accounts, we'll have the level of engagement, right? So we have support like that for the enterprise level accounts where they can tell, and actually the individual compliance is huge, right? And the more you can make it easier for people to look at the video and walk through, the better able they're going to be able to do it.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Yeah. There's just no compliance is like a huge thing. I was just making a little joke.
No,
what's the name? What's the name of that? Does it have a? Is it just like?
It's our HEP and PE programs, so home exercise programs and PE programs. And when you go to our site, it has it in the top right where you can kind of sort of see what the exercises are.
Gotcha.
Or the library looks like.
Does that come? Do you have to like pay extra for that? For like?
Yeah, so we have a continuing education subscription, and then we have like the full subscription that if you're individual subscriber, you can like get the full package and get access to all those too. Gotcha. And then if your like employer goes for it, we have different levels of packages for them based on how many people they think are going to participate. Gotcha. So yeah.
Oh, sounds like a really good deal. I know I've gone through all of my questions and all the questions people have asked us. So if there's anything else like you really want everyone to know, or that something you think is like very important for new grad OTs that we haven't touched on, now would be the time before we kind of wrap things up.
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaways I would say are just really like get to know your board site, get early on those requirements so you know way ahead of time. Don't wait till the last minute. Because I see a lot of people panic at the last minute, and you know, when you have like 20 some hours to do, it gets hard if you're in the last 2 weeks of your and you need to renew.
You're right.
So just plan ahead and try to, and of course as new grads you want to learn a lot. So if this is the time, you know, get ahead of it and you know, pace yourself, right? Do a couple courses every so month, you know, every 3 months or something. So you feel confident about your renewal.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Well, Meredyth, thanks for joining me. I appreciate it, like taking the time, and I appreciate MedBridge for helping set up. I know you guys are nice enough to give us an affiliate code, but we're actually, this is coming up for all the listeners. You guys kind of get like a sneak peek. We got kind of like we have an article that's going to come out kind of like why it's important to be like a continuing education, or like just why being a lifelong learner is important. Mm-hmm. But MedBridge was nice enough to like agree to raffle off a year-long subscription. And so we're going to be doing that for our readers. So that's super cool. So thank to you and your team. That's like really generous of you guys. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Absolutely.
Well, awesome. Thanks, Meredyth. And
yeah, well, thanks for having me.
Again. Yeah, of course.
Sounds good.
All right.